There's a lot happening in New York Jets land, and we need to find out all the juicy deets, baby. It's a new era. Aaron, Glenn, Darren, Moochie. We're going to find all about it coming up next with a very special guest joining us here on Boy Green Daily.
I'm going to lose my gosh darn bananas. Boy Green Daily starts now. Zoinks!
I made it clear that my intention was to play, and my intention was to play for the New York Jets.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Paul Eston Jr., a.k.a. Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com. Welcome to Boy Green Daily, a daily New York Jets video show, also available wherever you find your friggin' podcast, people. And let's go to the mothership, one of the best in the business, ESPN NFL insider, Jeremy Fowler's back on the show, baby. What's up, Jeremy?
Hey, Paul, thanks for having me. That is a great intro. That video montage is intense.
All right, great. I'm glad that it fired you up and got all your juices flowing here, Jeremy, because there's one pressing question. There's a lot of stuff I want to get into you with, but one pressing question to me was last week it seemed like, okay, it's going to be Aaron Glenn and Lance Newmark. That's going to be the combo for the New York Jets. They both meet in person with the Jets last week. It seems like it's all going well. They both leave the Jets facilities the next day. Oh, Aaron Glenn's the guy, but whoa. All of a sudden, the Jets are reopening the GM search. There's new guys in the mix. Yeah. Jeremy, what happened there? It seemed like Lance Newmark was the guy. Then all of a sudden, he wasn't.
Well, it's funny. I was actually talking to some people about that at the Senior Bowl, and it did feel like, in part because some of the unpredictability with owner Woody Johnson and what's gone on in what's one Jets drive for a while now, it was kind of a spin the wheel situation. Depending on the day, you could maybe get a different general manager, because I was going through it like about a week and a half ago or so, 2 weeks. I thought Mike Borgonzi would be the leader. There was a lot of chatter league-wide that the Kansas City Chiefs assistant GM would be that guy, and then he takes the Titans job. I think sometimes when you get a GM offer, you got to take it. It's hard to wait for another team. And so at one point I thought maybe Mike Greenberg with the Buccaneers. And then, even interim GM Phil Savage was still in the mix a little bit there. So, but they at one point it did seem like Lance Newmark, yes. And we don't know. I can't confirm this. I don't know, but sure. I do wonder if maybe they got to a point where they were talking about him being in that role. Did he want the job, or was he willing to wait, knowing in Washington you have a good situation? You've got Cliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt Jr., two coordinators that will be in the mix and probably get a head coaching job in the future. Do you want to try to align with them? Just a thought. I don't know that that's real or not, but
right.
Somebody brought that up as maybe something that could explain the situation a little bit. But that said, they got a really good candidate in Darren Moogie from Denver. He's highly regarded by George Paton. Rick Spielman, who was involved in the search, knows George Paton well from their Minnesota days. Paton spoke highly of Darren Moogie, as did Sean Paton. He's really worked everywhere from like operations to handling budgets to player personnel to handling agents. Like he's done a lot. So it's definitely a good hire.
Yeah, maybe it's going to go back to what you just said with the spin a wheel with Woody Johnson, I guess. But the theme at the beginning of the search is experience. The Jets during Woody Johnson's 25 years of ownership he's always gone with first-time guys. The only time he didn't in the head coaching role was Adam Gase, and that was an epic failure. Every other guy was a first-time whack of the pinata for Woody Johnson that didn't have anything. And they end up with two first-time guys anyway. So that's sort of interesting, which leads us to both coaching staff and front office. If you have two first-time guys, that's fine. They're both interesting. But, man, it seems paramount to have experience in the rooms, whether that's for Aaron Glenn's staff or potentially in the front office around Darren Moogie. Let me ask you about Phil Savage first, because he's probably going to be with the Jets throughout the draft process anyway, just because of how POC committed they already are and the draft just being right around the corner. Is he a guy that could stick around? Who else? Let's start off in the front office. Who else could come along with Darren Moogie that would make a lot of sense?
Yeah, I don't know that those decisions are made yet. I think a lot of that's up in the air. If it could be a situation where they want to cleanse from the Joe Douglas regime. But on the flip side, like you mentioned, Phil Savage has a lot of experience in a room that probably needs it. And they have a staff there that's done pretty well. And look, they've drafted good players under Joe Douglas for the most part. You can knock the Jets all you want, but some of the personnel moves weren't the worst. So, certainly they can't clean house completely. You need a good solid base of a scouting staff that you inherit, especially before April. It'd be hard to do that right now as we're in the thick of the Senior Bowl and all that. So some might stay, some might go. I can see it going either way. And, with Aaron Glenn, with his staff, certainly the name I hear often on the defensive side is Steve Wilks, veteran NFL coach, former interim head coach, 49ers defensive coordinator. If I had to call a favorite on the defensive side, that would probably be him. But, he's got to go through the process. I don't know if they've interviewed anybody yet on the defensive side that I've seen.
No.
I don't think so. So they're just getting started. I think on offense, back to Wilks, he brings that experience that you need, right? He's been around a long, seen a lot. He can help Aaron Glenn in a lot of ways, kind of in that assistant head coach role almost, along as being a defensive coordinator. But, on offense, I get the sense he's going to go more with the hot hand, whatever that is, with Nick Caley, with the Rams, tight ends coach. Tanner Eggstrom, who is the pass game coordinator with the Lions, has come up a good amount. The thing with Caley is I think he's going to have options. He's in the mix for Tampa. It could be in the mix for some others. He does appear to be a hot name right now. So if you're ranking OC jobs, I don't know that the Jets are at the top. So that could make it tricky, So, we'll see how they prioritize it. But I tend to think they'll get somebody maybe a little more up and coming who can run the offense.
And if I think I read it correctly, I wasn't aware of this too. I think I saw it in the NFL rule book. The Rooney rule is not just head coach and GM. That's also for coordinators as well. So you can't just hire whoever you want. You have to go through that process. So what's that timeline look like? To your point, I know Aaron Glenn was introduced on Monday. The Jet fans are, starving to try to figure out what the heck is going to be going on with the staff. But obviously there's a process to it. We haven't heard a lot of, to your point, the rumors of, this guy interviewed here, or this guy interviewed here yet with the Jets.
Yeah, and they got to get started on that. So I guess there's no real rush, but on the other end, you want to wrap up your staff as you get into the draft. So I would say the Jets have to interview 2 minority candidates. I do expect them to interview Steve Wilks on the defensive side. That would be one. But we're seeing this around the league, right? You got to go through the process where you interview these candidates. A lot of times that they're not going to be hiring those people, which is unfortunate, I think, as we know. You see the word sham thrown around. The flip side of that is, though, those guys do get valuable interview experience. In some cases, like with the Patriots, when they're interviewing Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich, the flip side is those guys were out of the game for a year. They probably need to get back in the news cycle. So there are benefits too. But unfortunately, you see with the Dallas Cowboys situation, everybody knew they were going to hire Matt Eberflus as their defensive coordinator. That was their plan. So it's a workaround situation a little bit. So we'll see what happens there. But the Jets, they have to go through that process. So really, you have to do at least 2 interviews per coordinator spot before you make a hire.
So the Jets hire Aaron Glenn, and Jet fans love him. He's a former first-round pick. It's coming home. So that reception has been very warm, despite the fact he's a first-time head coach and a defensive guy that's been a lot of the waters that Woody Johnson has swept in. Again, Adam Gase, I mentioned he's the only retread that Woody has ever hired. He's also the only offensive-oriented head coach that he's ever hired. Everyone else has been priority defense first. So Aaron Glenn being hired, you're an NFL insider for ESPN, the mothership, baby. Jeremy Fowler here on the program. What's been the league-wide reception or reaction, rather, to Aaron Glenn being hired by the Jets? Positive, negative, something in between?
Yeah, I would say mostly positive. I mean, if you were ranking the candidates, he was top 3. Really, it was Mike Vrabel and Ben Johnson are sort of 1 and 1A, depending on how you flip it. Some would consider Aaron Glenn maybe as high as number 2 based on his body of work, but definitely a number 3. That was the feeling that he was going to get one of these jobs. So it was either the Jets or the Saints. He prioritized the Jets. And that was clear to me even before the regular season was over. I was hearing that he was intrigued by the Jets. Now, granted, he came in and out of the Jets era when it was pretty good. So, on some levels, he hasn't seen – he's seen it from far away, but he hasn't had a firsthand experience of some of the mess of the recent years. Right. So I'm not saying his vision is tainted, but, he came from more of a glory day a little bit when he was playing here. Sure. But that said, the Jets mean a lot to him. So he did prioritize this job over the Saints. And so that's a win for New York. I think most people see that as a win. Certainly he's got the defensive acumen. He's got the respect, the leadership. the key is really with any head coach, but in this case, first-time head coach, can he maximize the ability of players, put them in the right position to succeed so that the message doesn't get stale?
Mm-hmm.
These guys want to be put in the spot where they can perform and make themselves money in the future, and win games. So you kind of have to balance all that. Can you do that? I think so, but we haven't seen it. So, that has to shake out.
Jeremy, to be blunt, Jet fans, Darren Muji, who the hell is that? I mean, they saw him on the long list of candidates of all the guys they talked to. How much did you know about Darren Muji? How much digging did you have to do with all of your sourcing to give us some sort of a scope? Because, like I said, outside of the name and the bio on DenverBroncos.com, I mean, a lot of people just didn't know what they were getting here in Darren Muji.
Yeah, so he's been on the circuit. This was his first interview, I believe. But he was a name I had pointed to even last year. I remember when I put together lists of like potential candidates. I remember listing him last year. He didn't get any run in the cycle, but he was known as a fast riser, and he survived multiple regimes in Denver, which can be hard to do. Mm-hmm. And he's known as well organized. He's good with people. He's got a kind of a good even keel demeanor. So certainly that helped. I just, the Jets process was all over the map when they had interviewed 15 people or whatever it was, and they had gone a month in between first interviews before conducting a second interview, you just didn't know which direction you were going to go. So there was no indication that Darren was in the lead at that point. But then he obviously acquitted himself well. I know he felt really good about that first interview, so he felt like at the very least he would be in that top 3 to 4. He felt strongly about that. I do know that. And so, he made an impression, and he had good recommendations. And, they certainly scoured the earth for GM candidates based on all the work that the 33rd team did with Mike Tannenbaum and Rick Spielman for Woody Johnson and everybody involved. So they really, with the vast number of candidates they talked to, the fact that he stood out is a good sign.
All right, I'm going to put something on a pedestal here, Jeremy. You can either spike on it, and all Jet fans will be incredibly disappointed, or you can breathe some life into this. Jets offensive coordinator fans have been dreaming about is Josh McCown. Speaking of coming home, he's a quarterback coach in Minnesota. He could get a promotion here with the Jets. Makes a lot of sense. Now, it made probably more sense for Brian Flores with the direct Vikings connection. But is there any chance that Josh McCown would leave the wonderful confines of Minnesota, Kevin O'Connell, and all the wonderful things over there to come back home with the Jets, where he spent part of his very long NFL career, to be the OC here with the New York Jets?
That's an interesting question. I certainly can't confirm what his plans are, but I think he would entertain it. I personally would be hard-pressed to see him do it. I think he would stay just because you're in a great situation, and he's seen as a future head coach, so he can be a little selective, honestly. And it's tough to pass on these OC jobs. These OC jobs change lives now. They're multi-million-dollar jobs. Right. So I get it, but Josh played a long time. I think he's a measured guy. I think he would probably wait that out. They'd have to have a really good vision for the job, and really the wild card is Aaron Rodgers, which we can get into. But he's had his challenges with offensive coordinators in the past, so you have to know that you're going to be on the same. Well, first of all, you have to know whether he's going to play. Sure. And if he is going to play, is it going to be in more of a game manager role at this stage in his career? And, what does that look like? Can he play 17 games again? Which, by the way, I was talking to somebody about this today. Like, it is kind of a credit that he tears his Achilles, comes back and did play all 17 games at his age. Like, that was kind of a feat. I know it wasn't always pretty. And, that, like, at times it looked like the legs were shot a little bit. But when at the end of the year, he was healthy and was pretty good. Yeah. And he can still throw the ball better than any quarterback out here at the Senior Bowl where I am, so – like, he's still got that. And so, the new coordinator's got to decide, can they be comfortable with Rodgers, who kind of has his own system? Can you blend your system with his? How many audibles are going to be called, and are you going to know what's being called? There are a lot of challenges there that I think he's curbed a little bit. From my understanding, he was good this year with that, with Todd Downing and the staff. But, there's an adjustment. So.
So yeah, let's get into Aaron Rodgers. I guess there was a report from Jay Glazer and Ian Rappaport, some of your colleagues in the NFL insider business. I'll start off with Rappaport. He said that there was an openness from both sides once that Aaron Glenn has been chosen as the Jets head coach. That he was open to Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron
Mhm.
Rodgers, by virtue, was open to him.
Yeah.
And Aaron and Darren Muji didn't really provide a lot of details or where they're leaning during their introductory press conferences
Yeah.
earlier this week. Is there any sense on, again, it's a multi-layer decision, Rodgers himself deciding or not he whether wants to play football and
Right.
whether or not the Jets would want him? So there's a lot of action here. Any sense on the Aaron Rodgers, wind in the sails? Where's this thing blowing?
Nothing firm as far as what he's decided. I do get the sense that the Jets would be open to it, in part because of the Woody Johnson dynamic. And you heard him say the other day, or it was yesterday, I guess, right, where he said,
Yes.
Look, I'm going to let the coach, the GM, and I'm going to be a good owner and stay out of the way. Now, can he follow that? We'll see, right? I think if this was 6 months ago or maybe in the past, I don't think Aaron Rodgers would be back. I think I get the sense that Woody probably used Aaron as a scapegoat a little bit. That maybe like he felt that Aaron was he was easy to blame for the season that they had. I guess fair or not. That's the sense I get out of the building that he maybe looked at it that way. That those two maybe wouldn't gel to where they would want to be back with each other. But it's a new coach who needs a quarterback. There aren't a lot of solutions in this draft,
right?
And there's no slam dunk. You can try to go get, I don't know, Kirk Cousins or Sam Darnold, but I don't know that those options make more sense than Aaron Rodgers at this stage when you have a good running game, or should, and you have some weapons and you have a good defense. Like, it can work if you're a new coach coming in and, you see Rodgers as somebody that can still be serviceable. I mean, his numbers last year were not all that bad. So maybe not to his usual standard, but he's 41 years old. So I could see it. But the problem too is the contract. Like, there's that dead money you got to handle, and you're going to have to rework it. So can they get to a point where everybody's comfortable? That I don't know yet.
One fan question we got in here. This was Wild Wave. He says, what direction are the Jets heading? Because obviously there's a lot of talent on this team. And Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji were talking about winning, which Jets fans haven't seen a lot over the last 14 years. Only one winning season over that time. And when you say winning, that seems to lean towards like an Aaron Rodgers comeback potential, because the other options on the team aren't very there. Are the Jets heading for a complete and utter rebuild with this new era? Or are they going to try to pick up the pieces and say, hey, I think we can win with what we got and some other alterations here?
Yeah, well, I will say I do know that Aaron Glenn in his evaluation looked at the pieces, specifically the defense, and said, we can win here. Like, there's a feeling that this is not a complete rebuild. I know some multiple, like, assistant GM types, executives in the league that I talked to when the Jets job came open, when the GM job came open, that is, that said, like, it feels a little bit like Houston a couple years ago before they got CJ Stroud. Like, they had some pieces, now it's New York and things tend to go sideways, but there's enough in place to be able to do what you need to do. I mean, that defense has got 4 or 5 legitimate players. They're going to lose DJ Reed. You're going to lose Jamie and Sherwood most likely. So you're going to have to replenish, but there are some core pieces there. And, the offensive line should be pretty good, especially with the Penn State kid coming back and improving.
Oh, yeah.
And, you got Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, you got all those guys. So there's something to work with. You just need a quarterback, whether that's Rodgers or somebody in the draft. And, it's the thing about Houston is they had CJ Stroud, and the Jets don't have that option right now.
They do not. But this offseason, Jeremy, is the first time that all the kiddies for the 2022 class can get paid by virtue of their contracts. I'm talking Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson, Breece Hall. Those guys are all eligible for extensions. The one that seems to make the most sense of pay early with the consideration of the market is Garrett Wilson, and he has not been afraid to share his emotions or takes or things of that nature during opportunities. Is Garrett, because that feels like if Darren Muji wants to create some love among the fans, signing Garrett Wilson immediately we'd build Darren Mucci a statue. That's for damn sure. Garrett Wilson, life-altering contract. Is there any idea that the Jets could be proactive here? He still has multiple years left on his rookie deal, the 5th-year option. But, you could be proactive. You could lock your guy in who's shown some frustration in the past with all the losing. It would make a lot of sense.
It would make some sense. I don't agree that it makes a lot of sense in that there's really not much precedent for wide receivers that are first-round picks getting a deal after 3 years because of that 5th-year option. Like even Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase had to wait. Sure. Now, they were big money players that negotiated with their teams, and they couldn't reach a deal. We saw Devontae Smith with the Eagles reach a deal after 3 years. So maybe that's a template for Garrett Wilson, that kind of contract with more on it. You get interest because of the salary cap inflation.
Yeah.
I don't know. If I'm Wilson, I want to probably play the 4th year out and ball out and put up bigger numbers because he's had. I guess it depends on whether Rodgers is coming back, and we know that there's some chemistry
I guess that's true. Right.
So that could be a factor too. So it's tough. You want the security, but this is a guy that a lot of people around the league have long believed he's a top 10 receiver talent. Mm-hmm. This was supposed to be the year that he gets a chance to put it all together, and he was good. But he wasn't quite able to be, I think, what everybody sees as maximizing his talent. He can be that 1,400-yard guy, 1,500-yard guy. So I don't know. That's just me. If I'm his agent, or unless it's a great contract, it depends on what the Jets offer. But I would be trying to play it out a little bit. Let's have a huge year, just like Jamar Chase just did.
Yeah.
Now, I know Jamar Chase has Joe Burrow, so it's a different circumstance. But, go bet on yourself a little bit, and then the money will be even bigger. Right. But I don't know. I mean, it seems like there were trade rumors around Garrett Wilson not too long ago. So I don't know what to make of that either. And there's a lot to weigh here. Whether, does he want to be in New York? Are he and Aaron Glenn going to hit it off? Maybe that's a new fresh start for him that they can start over and kind of vibe from there.
Justin Jefferson was another one who bet on himself and got record-breaking money. So there's certainly some precedent for making that happen. Jeremy, right before we're getting you out of here, first off, is there anything in your notebook, New York Jets related, that you can share? So something juicy, anything Jetsy that you got for us?
Yeah, I would say so. I help my colleague Matt Bowen is former NFL safety. He does a top 50 free agent list. For us, it's coming out tomorrow, and I help them with it as far as like team perspective, and I check with my sources and see what's what. And like a name that came up unprompted by like 3 or 4 different teams was Sherwood, the linebacker. Like, wow, I think he's going to do really well. Yeah, I mean, now linebackers a lot of times they're capped financially, but he's going to have a lot of interest, I would say, more so than you would think. I think it was one of those cases where the Jets, like, they could have got a deal done with him before the year. And they didn't, and then he was balling out. So they're like, "Hey, what about now?" And it's like, "Well, it's too late." That was. I think it was that kind of situation from what I've heard. So he'll go to the open market most likely, and you got Jeff Ulbrich in Atlanta now. That could be an option. You have Robert Saleh in San Francisco, so he'll have places to go.
And obviously, you mentioned at the beginning of the interview here, Jeremy, as we're getting you out of here, you're down there at Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl, baby. What's something that was on your mind as you're heading there? Obviously, for all your wonderful stuff that you do for ESPN, what's something that's on your mind that you're hoping gets answered down there in Mobile? If it's certain prospects you're keeping an eye on, is it conversations, rubbing some elbows with some NFL people? What are you looking to gain from your Mobile trip?
Yeah, probably just more clarity on like the coaching carousel, which is mostly done from a head coach standpoint, but you got the Saints out there. They're in the driver's seat. They're the last standing. They can hire anybody, essentially. Sure. Kellen Moore, they had a long interview with him last night. They went deep into the night, and they have some other candidates. What's going to happen with Mike McCarthy. So it'd be good to get some clarity on that. I'm still in that mode, I guess. I'm trying to catch up on the prospects,
right?
But I'm clearly playing catch up at this stage. So I'm just trying to like catch up with some of these players and say hello and get to know their story a little bit. So. It looks like the quarterbacks today was a little bit of a hit or miss day for some of those guys. So, we'd like to see a better showing tomorrow. But, there's a lot of talk about Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. And, it's definitely considered a weaker class. There's no doubt. There's really no way around that. I think in most years they wouldn't be top 5 picks, but this year they're probably going to be, So people are sort of grappling with that. So, some quarterback clarity coming out of the week would be good.
All right, fascinating. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us again. ESPN NFL insider Jeremy Fowler, extraordinaire, back here on the show, and we'll have to do this again soon in the future. Jeremy, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you. Take care.